has disabled my video. I'm just going to do a real quick introduction. First of all, I want to say thanks to all of you for showing up on a Friday afternoon. That was awfully kind and really appreciated because we uh, we often have these during the week, and just the way scheduling went this week, we decided we're gonna have to do it on Wednesday. On Friday, and we're really pleased to see so many folks show up in person. So we're really glad to have you, and thanks for making the time for this. I'm particularly, oh yeah, I'm Sharon Rush. I'm executive director and co-founder of Nobility. I've been running this organization now, or it's been running me for 25 years or so. And it's amazing to me in some ways that we are still here and still talking about accessibility because I certainly thought that once the issue was raised and tech people understood the importance of including everyone, that this problem would be solved by all the tech geniuses out there. But I think one thing that happens is tech changes so quickly that the accessibility aspect of it has sometimes a hard time keeping up with how quickly it's changing. And we have a wonderful person here to talk about just that. Natalie Patrice Tucker is one of the most experienced people in terms of the breadth of her experience around technology, disability, and accessibility. She's been all the things. She's been a designer, a developer, a programmer, an engineer, a team lead, product owner. She's just really experienced the full spectrum, both of challenges and triumphs in when it comes to accessibility. So I can't wait to have more conversation with her, to hear more about her journey, and to thank her for being here. At the end of the session today, we will ask you to provide us some feedback. We'll do a little commercial about how to join our newsletter and be more involved with some of Nobility's activities. But once again, I really appreciate your being here. Thanks for your interest. Thanks for all you do. Welcome, Natalie, and I'm going to let you tell the story of your adventures this week, and take it away.
Thank you so much. So, Mark, if you will make us sort of a stadium. Oh, that's brilliant. Wow, I'm large. I'm extremely large. That's great. Howdy, y'all. My name is Natalie Patrice Tucker, and like Sharon said, I deeply appreciate you being here. You could do anything you want with your time, but that you're taking it to know, get more access to information about how you can be better at and bring more of yourself to inclusion and inclusive design and accessibility is delicious and delightful. And I can't thank you enough. So we're going to have more of a less formal conversation today because my slides got eaten by the dog, as it were. My laptop was stolen. Uh, so I'm going to be talking you through my notes, but it also, I'm really looking forward to it being a conversation. So feel free to stop me or raise a hand is even better, and say that you'd like to be, you want to ask a question, or you can put it in chat if you don't want to interrupt what I'm saying. But the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you, so as I'll explain more as we get into the conversation, I've been doing this work since the early 2000s, and so about a little bit more than 25 years. And there are a lot of things I would have loved to know as I've been navigating my career. And so I really have been deeply, deeply impacted along the course of my career by people who are willing to step up and answer my questions, be a mentor for me, provide support and guidance. And it's something that's deeply important to me about the way that I want to leave a legacy in this space. So if anything comes up um, that you want to, sort of dive deeper into, and or relates to something that you were hoping you would get out of this conversation, feel free to bring it up. And there'll be a little bit of space. There'll be some time at the end also for us to, if that's better. So let's get us started. I wanted to give the sort of outline of my career. And if you were looking at it, it would look like a windy road or a kipu. I don't know if any of you have heard about quipus, but in Central America, there was this incredible group of folks around the 15th century or so that, the Incas, who did not have a written language, but used a system of textiles, ropes, and knots and string to communicate various bits of information. And I love the idea of this tactile communication device being able to elucidate the twists and turns of a particular, whether that they were using it to count family members, to account for grain, to administer justice in their courts, all kinds of things, and many of them were destroyed due to the Spaniards' disrespect for Incan ways, but we still have several hundred of them, and we're not. Scientists are still working. Scientists and linguists and engineers are still working to understand exactly what some of them say. And so I mention that because when I think about my career, I think about it as this sort of textile strung with bits of information, and each little knot on a rope is an insight, and together it brings together my career. So my intention is that I would, tell you how I've lived this life, as it were, and also glean what we can, sort of mine the gold that I've been able to come away with, but also think about what's next and how we move forward. How would be a cause for that as well. So, as a lot of things, my great adventure started as a response to a heartache. In 1999, I moved to DC, which is the nonprofit capital of the world, from Central Virginia, where I was raised, to save the world. I was ending a marriage, and I was deeply brokenhearted. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself and my life. And what I landed on was that I wanted to save the world. I wanted to make a difference. So I moved to DC to be a political organizer for a living wage campaign in Montgomery County. And early on, I realized that the work, I wasn't well suited to the work of being a political organizer, knocking on doors, trying to convince folks to take action, sign a petition, call their elected officials to enact this change. But I also discovered coding, because this tiny nonprofit that I was working on, there were 7 of us, all together, uh, had a database that we used for all of our important information about our donors, about our events, about um, to contact folks to get them to our events and to our actions. Um, but it was a mess. And trying to get reports or even get in mailing labels for action postcards was a chore. But I love the puzzle of figuring it out. And so I taught myself SQL and whipped that bad boy into shape. And one of the things that I got out of that was, hey, maybe this is how I can save the world. Maybe I can do this. And that's one of the sort of knots on the string of my kipu, if you will, which is that I knew that I at that time I was just trying to make a difference, and I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it. But I had tried, you know, doing things that I didn't care about, and I could not bring myself to it. So I knew that whatever it was that I was going to be able to do, it was going to have to engage me completely. Um, but it was, you know, and it was the early days of the internet. And so that was infinitely more possible than it is now. I decided that maybe I could support nonprofits with administration. So, building websites, building databases, supporting volunteers, all of that. And increasingly, the nonprofits that I was working for, and these are folks like the Campaign for Labor Rights, the Washington Office on Africa, the 50 Years is Enough campaign, and the Global AIDS Alliance. Folks who were working with constituencies in places where there might be slower internet access, older browsers. Some of them were overseas, some of them were in rural places. But the through line was that we don't need bells and whistles. We need the information to get there and get there well and get there quickly. And this was during the 2000, 2001, and the internet was like the wild, wild west, baby. Um, some of you may recall the browser wars. That was the good part. There were one by one pixel GIFs. There were marquee scroll fonts. There was Geocities and MySpace. All kinds of interesting ways of having, like having a presence to millions of people on the world, and we were in a way kind of battling it out about what that would get to look like and what that would get to feel like. And I felt like I was on the edge of something. So one of the ways I taught myself to build websites for these nonprofits I was working on was by reading every single word of the specifications for XHTML and then HTML, CSS, ECMAScript, JavaScript. I fell in love with the standards, the elegance of it, the thoughtfulness of it, the work that went into communicating, the possibilities that it made, what it looked like it was making possible. So there was a bit of a divide where there were folks who were, about pushing the edges of what was possible on the internet, and there were folks like me who were really interested in how do we get the internet to be a force for pulling us together as humanity. How do we ensure that more and more of us get the benefits of what's possible? So at the time, there was a lot of conversation around what was called the semantic web. And I discovered the WCAG guidelines because I was deep in in the W3C's business. This was WCAG 1.0 at the time, and it was a hair on fire moment. It was like one of those things. I read it all 1,096 pages of it, uh, and not WCAG 1.0, but over time I've read all 1,000 printed out, in regular font. I I discovering that um, you know a group of kind, thoughtful people had done the hard labor of devising a standard for ensuring that everyone got included in the conversation in civic life. That's where I was. I had found my thing. I so um, Between 2000 and 2003, I got to build these websites, learn about WCAG, build my skill. And in about 2005, there was the Department of Health and Human Services went looking for a developer who knew what WCAG 1.0 was and knew how to implement it. There had been some lawsuits and some demand action around the accessibility of their websites. And um, I always say that if it weren't for the National Federation for the Blind, I would not have a career. Um, they made it possible for me to go into the federal government and I built a portal supporting folks who were transitioning out of houselessness, homelessness, at the time, homelessness resources exchange. And this is another thing. This is another one of those knots. While I knew I was making a difference, one of the things that I recognized was that working in the federal government was not, it did not feel like it would allow me to do what I wanted to do. I felt constrained by the pace, and also, sort of the inherent hierarchical rules and things that are it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. And you'll see this point come up earlier or later, but one of those nuggets, um, I realized that not only did I want to do something that made a difference, obviously, not only did I have to do something that I was going to be engaged in, but I needed to get paid to play, if you will. I needed to like have my work because like I'm still training myself. I'm still learning. I am learning. I am implementing. I am figuring it out as I go, and that's what's most exciting to me. And so the opportunity to grow and learn and contribute had to be there. So, and the way I thought about it was getting paid to play. Um, so that was a must-have, right? That I knew about myself. So I left the federal government and I reached out to this man who I had been reading his bit of a stalker. You know, I'd been reading his blog and paying attention to what he was saying and learning a lot from him from afar. But eventually, I just reached out and I said, his name is Tom Babensky. He had a consultancy called Even Grounds that did digital accessibility consulting and training. And he had an incredible blog. And I reached out and I said, I have loved your work. If there's any way I can be of service, please let me know. I would love to learn more. In particular, I don't know, like I'm lost in the weeds when it comes to screen readers. And to Tom is blind, and he was like, sure, I'm sure he thought it was the same, but he became my first mentor, taught me a lot, not only about like working with so many different kinds of people, because I, uh, when it was supporting in doing trainings and audits and remediation and that sort of thing over the course of a few years, but learning um, diplomacy and how to talk to various levels of folks, have folks hear you. And that's when I began to realize that um, yes, there's the exciting, interesting technical bits, but accessibility is as much an art as a science. It's about causing the human relationships that are going to make it possible to build better and better products. And um, so, it also opened up this new challenging world where, like I thought it was going to be me and the code. And, like me, I was literally going to build an army of developers. And we were going to, everybody was going to be trained, everybody was going to know what to do. And, uh, you know, bada bing, bada bang, Bob's your uncle. Everybody can, like we have this, imagine what's going to be possible when everybody can contribute to the conversation, is what I was, like where I was going with it. But then I came to find out that, like it's not just the engineers, the designers need to understand how to talk to the engineers. I need to be able to talk to the designers in their language. And I, you know, to be honest with you, I have always been deeply intimidated by folks who are visual thinkers, who understand color and composition. And I always thought it was like some witchy art. And like I love art. I love it. And thinking of myself as an artist or a designer, never the two shall meet. So I felt really intimidated. But, one of the things that I got early on is that accessibility is as much about the hearts and minds as it is about the actual technical challenges of building things. And the technical challenges are great. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of them, and there are different magnitudes of them in the ways that they intersect between different individual contributors, between different roles, between different parts of the business. It's all very intricate. So it's not just, an edict where you say, thou must do this, and suddenly, all these things come to be. Just because I have, increasingly more experience and the expert in this thing doesn't make me the didn't necessarily make me the buck stopper, if you will. Okay. So when I worked with Tom for a few years, and it was magnificent and marvelous. And then Tom pivoted and got to do some incredible work with the Hadley School for the Blind, and I continued consulting, opened my own consultancy. But this was, about 2005, 2006, 2007, and there weren't a whole lot of full-time accessibility focused roles. And that I knew what I wanted to do. There was still so much I needed to learn. There was still so much I thought I could do. I did not want to become a generalist. And what that meant was that I needed to follow the work. So I lived in DC, and then I moved to New York, and then I lived in Connecticut. I did work for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, building workers' compensation and insurance systems. I built a course that taught document authors at the Hartford how to remediate 200 more than 200 documents, and create accessible documents in the way. I just went wherever the work was, and then a funny thing happened. WCAG 2.0 happened. Um, and while conversations about WCAG 2.0 were in the works as early as 2001, it didn't really come down the pike and sort of get rubber to the ground until 2000, about 2007, 2008, when all of a sudden, just like dominoes falling into place, um, the international rules around accessibility, the national rules around accessibility, like Section 508, and state and local laws started harmonizing around WCAG 2.0 level AA as the standard for accessibility. And I have been working in this space. I have been working with WCAG for quite some time at that point. And so that meant that I went from being a sort of a team lead, an individual contributor, developer, to leading a program of work. So I got to build ACA portals on behalf of Accenture Software in advance of the rollout of Obamacare. And what that meant was that we had several engineering teams building portals for several states. I think we were working on 5 different states. We were managing that the process of building, designing, developing, and ensuring that not only that there was testing, and that we were thinking about accessibility all along the way, and that the risks were identified and accounted for, and the trade-offs were documented and accounted for, and finally that we were able to produce VPATs and other documentation about our work. That process lasted for a couple of years, and by that time, like it seems almost like overnight, but of course not really. So, but overnight, digital accessibility was having its heyday. More and more folks were understood about WCAG, were referencing WCAG, people who from far, far, far and wide. So where I had been able to sort of keep tabs on and learn from, and folks here and there over the beginning of my career. By that time, there were folks all over the place, all over the world, who were learning about digital accessibility and becoming experts, and talking about their expertise in particular ways. It was brilliant. It has been brilliant and delicious. And one of the things that I recognized is that, I still very much I really want to be doing the work. I want to see those products come out that make a difference. I love it when that gets to happen. So getting to, most recently in 2021, sort of moving along this trajectory in between that time, between 2008 or 2010, 11, when Obamacare rolled out, and when I went to work with Spotify, I got to work with Benetech. I got to work with Microsoft, building an accessibility program for Bing and Cortana. I built an accessibility program at Dropbox, just extraordinary work. Um, and so, in you know, 2021, I had the honor and privilege of being asked to support accessibility at Spotify, and it, this was an organization that had a sort of grassroots commitment to accessibility, but we're looking to formalize it when I walked in and built a team, and it was extraordinary. And one of the things about that experience is that sometimes it takes a long time to see the fruits of your labor, if you will. And that has showed up in the past, but in a particularly gratifying way. The ways that me and my team were able to influence and contribute to uh, Spotify product, and in particular, Spotify Wrapped, ensuring that it was accessible and engaging and delightful, um, and that considerations for people with disabilities considered from the start was extraordinary, because the first year that I was there, we sort of came at the end, found a bunch of bugs. We were only able to, fix a few of them. But by the last year that I was there, we were there at the beginning in the design phase. We were, part of the secret meetings about what Spotify Wrap was going to look like. And it was an extraordinary sea change that required building and enforcing relationships, and sort of taking the long view. Okay. Yes. And so one of the things that has made it possible for me to go from, as I tell people, sometimes my mother, for quite some time, I think my mother thought that I, like worked as a front for terrorist activity. I would try to explain what I did and why, I was passionate about it. And nobody, nobody did what I did, and it didn't make a lot of sense. And um, but especially in the beginning and all along my journey, I couldn't have done it without folks in the field like Sharon, like my dear friend Laura Samuels, like Tom Babisky, who I mentioned, who were willing to sort of take me on and answer my what I thought were stupid questions, and support me both socially and professionally. Well, so one of the things that happened during those sort of middle years I glossed over was while I was doing this incredible work redesigning the Bookshare portal, helping to redesign the Bookshare portal, which makes print resources available to print disabled folks, particularly those who are blind and low vision, and those with certain kinds of cognitive differences. And we were redesigning the portal for this tool, and I was doing, going to be doing some user research. I needed to ensure that I was including considerations for people with cognitive differences, and I felt like I was a little weak around that. So I started doing some research, and I was doing research, and I had an epiphany, and oh my gosh, that completely changed my life when I realized that, oh my goodness, it is very likely, very possible, could it be, oh my God, no, not me, I think I'm autistic. So I was 35, this is, 2015, 17, something like that. And I was, on the one hand, like seeing it, I was like, as I'm reading this, as I'm incorporating the work, as I'm doing the user research, as I'm finding myself in the work, and being able to talk about my life and in ways that I had never been able to before, I was also scared out of my wits, right? I had been doing this work for a long time at that point, and I did not know that I was doing it for myself, and I did not want anyone to think that I was like just making it up, and I didn't care. I getting building a community with other Black women who are autistic and neurodivergent in other ways, like revolutionized my life. And so that like it wasn't until just a few years ago that I even bothered to get any kind of formal, you know, confirmation, if you will. And by that time, like I had all of this language, and like I was doing the work for me as well as for the people I cared about in the world in my life, and for the lofty goals that I had set out for myself. And so, of course, this is a truism across the board with accessibility, but you know, one of those knots is what you do for another, you do for yourself, right? Um, in the same way that I didn't realize that I was helping myself, my commitment made it possible for me to make such a huge difference for myself and the world.
Hey, Natalie, this is Sharon. I've tried to find how to raise my hand, and I'm on my phone because I'm having laptop problems.
Are people trying to raise their hand and not being able to? I'm not check. Okay, good. Did you wanna step in? Let's see.
Looks like she's muted herself again. So that was from Sharon. It says, given what you said about as much an art
No,
as
I wanted to ask a different question right now, Mark. I
okay.
wanted to ask.
Sharon, you got muted again.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Given what you said about your diagnosis, about the fact that you got this diagnosis, and you talked about, oh, I don't want people to think I'm doing it just for myself or whatever, which I get that. It makes some sense, but I wondered if you found that it had any impact on your approach to the work itself. Did it change the way you approach doing the work, or did you have the same passion and the same dedication? Because one of the things I always think about accessibility work is that it's not disability specific, right?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, knowing that I was, like I was inside of the conversation, but I think ultimately we all are. We always are. Maybe not right
Yeah.
now, maybe only for a moment and then not. But ultimately we all are. But what it did do was help me understand the parts of my work which have always been harder for me, right? So, um, under office politics and certain kinds of ways of communicating and passive aggressiveness and learning like really like I did deep dive intensive work around communication. I mean, I've always loved words and language, principally because it's so exciting to me when I can make sense of things, when I can categorize things, when I can begin to synthesize ways, things from bringing up. So all of that, like I think it is a function and sort of a prize for having the kind of brain that I have. But I didn't realize until, I was like, the whole reason I am in this field is because the specifications were my special interests. And, like I would never have had words for it. Yeah,
Well,
or
I wonder also, given that we only have 15 minutes, is that right, Mark? We go for an hour?
Yes.
Because I know that you've always, in the conversations we've had previously, you've always told me that that mentoring was such an important thing to you, and I imagine that people who are attending today who came because of the things we talked about that we were going to cover would be very interested in ways that you found your mentors, because I think that's one of the challenges, especially after COVID. People are more distributed. There aren't those kinds of workplace things that are as steady. I mean, even people who are back in the office are usually back for just maybe part-time, a couple days a week. So where do you go to find your mentors, and how do you make those connections that help you build a career?
so great. Um, it does take a bit of boldness to reach out to folks who you may only have a parasocial relationship with via social media or seeing lectures, to say, hey, you're doing incredible work. Are there ways I can be of service to you? Can I take a moment of your time to ask you some questions? And another thing, so people will reach out to me all the time on LinkedIn. Just send a message and say, basically, can I take you for a coffee? Can I have 15 minutes, 30 minutes of your time? Um, and it is an honor and a privilege to do that when and where I can, and I try to as often as I can, because I know the courage it takes. And also, more and more folks are working with other people. You're not an island of one. So that's what made it possible for me to connect with Lori. We ended up working at Microsoft together, and I didn't know Lori before that. Uh, or I don't know that I would have met you if I had met Lori in that way, because Lori introduced me to you, and then although I had known about no nobilities work for a long time, I didn't know
You
you.
know, actually, um, I was your fangirl before Lori. I asked Lori to introduce us
No,
because
you did. Nobody
I
ever
had
told me
seen,
that.
yeah, yeah. I know, I never told you that before, but I saw you do, it was a Colorado group it was you and Regine Gilbert and someone else. And I just thought, wow, this woman is so passionate about what she does. And then when Lori mentioned your name, I said, oh, Natalie, could you introduce me to her? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I think that's one of the things that brings people to this field, is that sense that I want to do more than just do tech, right? Tech is great and it's exciting and it's new and it builds the future world, but that human element that is in accessibility, I think, is one of the things that really brings people to it. And to connect through that passion for doing tech for good in some way, I think, is one of the things that brings people together. And I totally support what you said about finding mentors, being bold, finding people like I did. I saw you on that podcast or whatever it was, that webinar. And then when I heard your name come by, I said, could you introduce me to her? And I think that's a really good thing. Also, there are programs, like volunteer. You can volunteer for different tech programs, maybe at the IAAP or at Nobility or different different nonprofits that have a tech. Benetech, you mentioned Benetech.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
volunteer there, and you find other people who are interested too, in terms of getting connected in that way. But since we only have a few minutes, I wondered if any others in the group had questions or wanted to ask anything of Natalie. I know we mentioned that we were going to talk a little bit about AI today too,
But that
which
was
we
really
haven't.
just to bring you in. It's all the same. The long and short of the AI is that there's a lot of really fun stuff happening. I'm working actually with a startup that's doing as an AI play around an accessibility play platform, which is really exciting. But the long and short of it is that, you know, that there will always be east to get to. You'll never be able to take the humanity out of accessibility work. We need more and more eyes in. We can't just leave it to our robot overlords, as Carl Gross says. You know, so, but yeah, and we can talk. I can talk ad infinity about all that stuff anytime.
Natalie, we do have I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce this, Dia Milito, who would like to answer a question or ask a question.
Are you able to take them off mute?
I've asked them to unmute.
Okay.
Hello.
Here. Yep, we're
Hey.
hearing.
Yes, hi, my name is Dia Mileto. First of all, thank you for everything that you are doing for the community. So, I have a bachelor in psychology and computer science, and I'm a certified trusted tester. So, my question is, what will be the best option for me to have either an apprenticeship or an internship or an entry-level job in digital accessibility?
Okay. So, to I mean, there are a couple of ways to think about it. I advise folks to find what's exciting to you. Um, it's a huge world. There's lots of moving bits and pieces. What folks are looking for today may not be the same thing that's being looked for in several years. So it's good if you, rather than chasing what works, is that you get clear about what most interests you, what you're most engaged in learning about, and dive in deep and or wide, depending on where you want to see yourself go. Now, I did have a little bit of trouble hearing you towards the end, so I want to make sure I answered your question, like in full. Can
I,
you? Yeah.
yeah, I am a certified trusted tester for web
Yep.
accessibility
Yep.
testing.
Uh-huh.
So, and I'm really looking for an apprenticeship or internship or entry-level job. I have a passion to contribute to the digital accessibility improvement.
Have you considered um, working with one of the consultancies? Sometimes one of the larger consultancy. There are accessibility consultancies, but there are also, folks like Tata and HCL and KPMG, who
Or Deloitte.
are, yes, exactly, Accenture, Deloitte, all of those folks. Um, and I often tell people, especially right now, with everything that's going on, um, it's going to take a little guerrilla warfare, if you will, to make the kind of difference that I'm committed to make. So maybe accessibility isn't front and center in your job title. Maybe it's you continue to be, you work to be a senior tester who can do anything well, and you have the specialization in accessibility, you know? So you may have to pivot and shift in order to continue to do what you want to do while building skill and remaining interested and engaged.
So, do you have any company, or do you help, or you do know any community that can help people get into that?
Quite honest, are you willing to look me up on LinkedIn? Can I share my LinkedIn information with you, and then I can put you on? But the long and short of it is that for consultancies are often looking to have testers, especially especially folks with 2, 3, 4 years of experience. It's a great way to get some experience and like, so reaching out to level excess or DQ or nobility or, they have this school for the blind, depending on where you are, there are, even smaller, a fixed, Carl Grove's outfit, is hiring for, I don't know if they're hiring for testers, but I know that they're hiring for engineers.
Natalie, I think right now might be a really good time for me to do a real quick commercial for our accessibility internet rally, because every year Nobility does an accessible web design contest, and we're recruiting people for this year's event. It happens closer toward the end of the year, but we're actively recruiting, and basically what we do is we recruit people who are designers, developers, testers. We put them on teams and we have them design an accessible website for a nonprofit organization. And then we judge the work that's been done for accessibility. And we have hundreds of people who volunteer. It's a very strong and joyful community collaboration, and it runs for weeks and weeks, so you get to meet new people or work with a team of people you already know on an accessibility project. And so if you go to nobility.org, and I think it's the main banner right now, we say, come join AIR 2025. But it's a really great way to get started. And I can tell you, I could name dozens of people who got started in a career by being on an AIR team, meeting other people, and then either getting a job or becoming a consultant or becoming a judge and a tester. So it's a really, really great way to, so that just was a happy segue asking about a community of people, because that's exactly what the Accessibility Internet Rally program does. So I would encourage anyone who's looking to break into a new career here to check that out, because it's a great opportunity, and it's a lot of fun, and it approaches accessibility from the point of view of creative challenge rather than legal mandate. So that's kind of fun too. So that's done with my commercial.
Thank you, Sharon. And I did put the link in the chat along with the LinkedIn link for Natalie. We have another question that came through here. It says, do you have any thoughts about the recently published Forbes Accessibility 100?
I have lots of thoughts. I have, like friends and colleagues who are on that list, and it makes me excited to see the hard work, blood, sweat, and tears rewarded. Of course, there are folks who are, obvious omissions, and that's no fun to see. But if there's only 100 folk, like, I wonder what like how that whole process went down. And I'm just excited that there's another way to keep the conversation front and center, especially when there are a lot of conversations for making it quieter, even though there are more and more reasons why we should be talking about inclusion, why we should be upfront about those things. But I love the visibility that it's bringing to the work, and the lives and the commitments of so many folks, and that it's an introduction to a lot of folks that this is even happening. I had a recruiter the other day say to me, I had no idea this was the thing that you could do. I was like, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so there's always going to be more internet than there is accessibility, right?
Natalie, it's 4:00 or just a couple of minutes until. I think we have time maybe for one more question, but before we take that, I just want to thank you again. You're so generous with your time, your talents, your skills. It's been really great to hear about your adventures through the years, and the fact that you are still, even in this political climate, that you are still dedicated and doing this work, because, gosh, it's so important. Mark, are there any other questions?
We do have another one here. With accessibility being such a broad field, do you have tips on finding your niche or specialties?
Um, Try dibble and dabble, find a little bit of everything. Most recently, I've become delighted and intrigued and excited about design systems. I got to work with a little bit at Dropbox, a lot more with Spotify, and now I've got a bit of a bug. So, you know, like look and see what other folks are doing. Um, you know, learn new things, try and fail. You know, those are great ways to, you know, like, and you don't necessarily have to have a niche, right? You could be a product manager, and in stealth mode you are an accessibility guy. Do you know, like, I know folks like that, you know, whose their job title says nothing about them as an accessibility professional, but they are killing it, making it happen. So you get to say.
Once again, thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here with us on a Friday afternoon. And thanks, Mark, for your good stewardship, and Natalie for sharing your wisdom.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for all of you for being here. Sharon went over the Accessibility Internet Rally, but there is more information at knowbility.org/air. We are looking for people who are web developers and anything along that line, from project management, UX design, as well as what we call our clients, our nonprofits and non-governmental organizations, artists and musicians. Everybody wins out of this because they get to learn a lot about accessibility throughout the program, which actually kicks off September 19th, but we're recruiting right now. So you can get more information on that at knowbility.org/air. You can sign up for our newsletter at knowbility.org/subscribe to stay in the know. Follow us on social media, or you can email us at events@knowbility.org. Finally, if you would take a moment and give us a little bit of feedback about today's session and this program, we'd greatly appreciate it. There's a QR code on the screen, or you can go to knowbility.org/BADA survey. That's BADA survey. Thanks again for being here. We truly appreciate it. We'll have another one to announce for next month very soon. Thank you.
Y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.